Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Don't Praise the Machine. This is the internet's #1 comedy podcast talking about the ways that technology is shaping culture and so much more. I'm one of your hosts. I go by the name Alexander Holland. I'm sat in Berlin, Germany, and sat underneath me deep down in dirty Melbourne town in the Southern Hemisphere, as he is every single week. It's the #1 tenured professor of podcasting. He's got to be the one called
John Junior Burst Maloney.
John, I'm going to start off this week with a question that I think you're really going to love hearing from me. And you're going to think, that's a question I can take to the bank and use this week's series of dinner parties. I actually don't know if it's a good dinner party question, but I've got something that I want to say. I thought this would be a good way to get it in.
Sure.
Do you have any fresh fruit in your house right now?
Yeah, I don't know about the dinner party. I agree.
Just turn to Mike at the barbecue and ask him that without having introduced yourself.
How's your fresh fruit going, Mark? Say, my name's Steve. I do have an ample supply of fresh fruit. I've been getting into Nashi pears lately. Guys, if you live anywhere near Preston Market, I recommend going down there on a Saturday morning. They got Nashi pears. If you turn up at the right time, they'll be trying to offload them for a fucking song.
Yeah.
And you can gnash your bloody gums off if you want. So yeah, we've got a few of them. We've got some mandarins. Occasionally we've got a banana.
You are a fresh fruit house. That's good to hear.
Or a fresh fruit house.
And so you're reaching for that bowl and you're selecting fresh fruit. The reason that I wanted to talk about this is because I wanted to make a very, very important announcement that I discovered in myself this week. I was in the supermarket and I was in the fresh fruit aisle and I realized that a big change has happened in my life, and that is an announcement that I want to make on Don't Praise the Machine this morning.
Okay.
And that is that I am no longer saying that bananas are my #1 favorite fruit. There is a new champion in town, and I want to announce it on the podcast today, and it's peaches.
Okay. Wow.
I'm not embarrassed. I'm a peach freak.
You're a peach freak. That explains your overuse of the peach emoji. Interesting.
Man.
So what happened? Can you identify the moment?
I was with my friend Dom in Barcelona earlier this year.
Yeah.
And he was just like, have some of these peaches. And I was like, oh, fruit. I'd rather just eat a Snickers. Don't feed me fruit. That's like, that's healthy bullshit food. Can't I just have marshmallows, Uncle Dom?
Yeah.
And he'd say,
why would you have nature's candy?
Why would you have
nature's candy?
And then he put a bunch of peach slices out. And I was like, yeah, whatever, peaches. And then I was eating them. And I was like, this is absolutely incredible. I can't believe how delicious. And I said I've never said this before, but I said, can I have another piece of fruit? Because growing up, and my mum will attest to this, growing up, I would eat fruit, to be honest, this is kind of how I've been my adult life. I will eat fruit, but it has to be put in front of me. I'm not going to go and choose fruit typically, because I don't know, just as a kid, I guess mum was like, here's a bowl of grapes, here's nectarines. And then as an adult,
it's a real 90s thing, isn't it, that they thought, they were looking up at the food pyramid and it said, give your child plenty of white bread and and heaps and heaps of fruit, and ideally fruit juice, because they'll have that, and it's got all the pulp extracted. It's just the sugary juice. And now we've all got diabetes. Thanks, parents.
And it turned out the food pyramid definitely had nothing to do with the food industry and a partnership it had with the government to do with subsidies and certain foods they wanted to shove down our throat. It was just definitely developed by doctors and nutritionists and scientists who had
scientician. Just ask this scientician.
That's why my mum was like, you better have 42 servings of grain today, Alex, like a cow that's getting ready to be slaughtered. I was like, I don't want to eat any more grain. I'm getting fat. The kids are teasing me. And she said, look at the food pyramid. Just have cow's milk and grain. I was like, this doesn't seem right.
You're just eating like a yak.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I had the same. I mean, I associate, like I always feel a bit weird when Cint goes, do you want, like the other day, she said, do you want this nashi pear?
Yeah.
I'm going to have one. And I said, that sounds great. And she brought me like sliced up nashi pear on a plate. And I was like, oh, this feels a bit Freudian.
On a plastic plate with a picture of Mickey Mouse on it.
Exactly.
And a little plastic fork.
Are you enjoying your cartoons? And I went, not comfortable with this.
So Dom was like, here, why don't you have some of these peaches? And I was like, this is mental. And then I said to him, dude, have you got any more of those peaches? And then I was just hammering peaches in Barcelona. And then I got back here and it's peach season. And I've spent so much. I've just been spending too much money on, because I have a sweet tooth. And I'm not even reading how much they are per kilogram. And sometimes I make terrible errors where I just go, oh, these will be fine. And I get 2 of the wrong ones. And it's like 12 euros for 2 peaches from some exotic peach location. And then other times it's getting to the end of the season. And so if I just head down to my local Reva right now, my Reva City, sometimes you get like a whole punnet. They're just trying to fuck off for like €1. And I'm probably, I don't know, how... Have there been cases of people that have put on tons of weight just through fruit? I feel like normally when people eat, like I don't think you see morbidly obese people that just eat fruit. So how much fruit can I eat before I start? How many peaches can I eat before?
I think if you have to say that question, it's too much. You're eating too much.
It's like, I was like, this just tastes like lollies. This is incredible. And I wait for them. I take a bite if it's not ripe yet. I just wait a few days. And then it's just like party in my mouth. And it makes me think of Kramer and the Mackinac peaches, Jerry. The Mackinac I was just thinking of peaches. That.
Yeah. And then it gets poisoned by the fumigation and can't taste them. But
that's right.
But yeah, look, I can relate. I mean, I went through a period because we have a grapefruit tree. This dynamite content. We've got a grapefruit tree in our backyard, and it was very productive this year, and gave us lots of grapefruits over the winter.
Because
and it felt like
you love a 1980s diet fad. So
exactly, I was just going to say, it felt like I felt like I was in Wall Street, just reading the Wall Street Journal and having my grapefruit and coffee, and because it's such a kind of, it was a real, I mean, I think that's why it's there. Apparently it's quite common to find them in backyards because, in the 70s and 80s, people were like, oh, it's the new superfood. Everyone should have a grapefruit tree in their backyard. Then we don't have to pay all this money for grapefruits. And then everyone's
thin and beautiful and successful.
Exactly. But they are quite nice. And so I just resorted to, like, anyone who could take them. I was like, here, have a bag of 12 grapefruits. And I brought them camping, and everyone was like,
Christmas presents.
Exactly. Everyone was like, we don't really want these. They're kind of an acquired taste. They're very tart. And I'm like, come on, everyone. Have a grapefruit. So good,
just bringing like 12 grapefruits on the camp. Everybody else has got s'mores and M&Ms and chips.
Yeah. Just a cauldron of chili on the fire. And I'm like, you know what's good with chili?
So that's
should I just put a few in? You won't even taste them. Come on, guys.
A few slices. Guys, don't you know, you put it between the s'more. You just put a slice. Haven't you guys heard of this before? I'm really contributing to this camp.
Grape s'more.
Don't anyone talk behind my back that I'm not. Don't anyone say anything about me bringing these grapefruit on the camp.
And I woke up and they were all gone. And I said, did you guys eat them all? And they said, yeah. Sure.
Yeah. We sure did. And don't look in the creek. And John, when I spoke to you in the week, you said to me, speaking of, are you going to do the food bit? Because I was going to do a segue.
Yeah. Let's do it.
Speaking of grapefruit and diet and and appetite.
An appetite. Yeah. That'll do. It's a good segue. You've given me all I need there. So, yeah, I was having a bit of a look during the week because, I mean, I've sort of been, this has been vaguely on my radar for a few weeks because I somehow found out that the 23rd to the 25th of August, I think it was, this year, was the 40-hour famine in Australia.
Right.
And I thought that's something I really remember from my childhood, particularly, I reckon, like around the sort of early 90s period. I remember all the kids at school would do the MS Readathon.
Right.
They'd do Red Nose Day, but the other big charitable kind of drive that was a huge cultural event was the 40-hour famine. And I thought, I'm going to do a bit of research on it and find out where it all came from. And I realized, because I thought, to what extent is this just an Australian thing? And I realized it seems particularly prominent in several countries, but including Australia and New Zealand. And us in New Zealand do, in particular, the 40-hour famine, which is a World Vision fundraiser.
Yeah.
And elsewhere, it's so for anyone who's totally unfamiliar with it, basically the idea is that it's under famine events in Wikipedia, which it might sound like a very morbid thing to Wikipedia, but actually it's just about these charitable drives. It says, localized events are voluntary fasting for 30 or 40 hours, depending on the region, to raise money and awareness for world hunger. These events are usually coordinated by one or more one of various World Vision organizations and are done by youth in church organizations.
Yeah.
They've spread internationally. There's a 30-hour famine, but obviously we're a bit more hard down here. So we go an extra 10 hours in Australia and New Zealand. And in the UK, those fucking pussies, they go for 24 hours.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. That's nothing. I sometimes go 24 hours without realizing it.
I can't go a day without a pint. Can't go a day without a pint.
Exactly.
Lager.
What about my tea and toast?
What about my Tunney's tea cakes and my tea and toast and my jellied eels? They're allowed to have jellied eel, whereas we're allowed to have barley sugar on plan.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. And so the standard is 30 hours, and that's spread to 21 countries. It's been around for ages. So yeah, there's these 21 countries where they do the 30-hour famine. Then there's an additional 10 hours here. And of course, as it's gone on, it's become more, it's been watered down because we live in the age of people being a bit coddled.
Yeah.
And so, these days, everyone freaks out that if you stop eating for 40 hours, you go into cardiac arrest or something. So there's various different, initially I thought, well, that sort of seemed like, in this age, it might have gone out of fashion altogether.
Yeah.
It's still around.
And John,
there are these
just for our international listeners, the idea is basically you as a person, you say, I'm not going to eat for 24 hours, or in Australia, I'm not going to eat for 40 hours. Who will sponsor me to not eat for 40 hours?
Right.
Like
that's how you raise money.
I'm collecting money for kids starving kids in Africa. I tell everybody, hey, I'm going to do this challenge. I'm not going to eat for 40 hours. Will you sponsor that? The money
exactly
goes to Africa.
Yeah. And I think the reason I got reminded of it, apart from the fact that it was it happened recently, was there's this meme that occasionally pops up in my feed where they interview this Australian kid who's just finished it. And it was so typical of the kinds of stories that I remember from that time of other school kids doing it, where he's basically saying, I did it. I'm really proud of myself.
Yeah.
And the interviewer's like, what did you do it for? And he basically has no fucking idea about the situation.
I know that video.
Oh, they're in Africa or Asia or something, and they're starving or whatever. Thanks. And I always found it a bit. I never did it, but in fact, probably I'd be more inclined now because I've tried a bit of intermittent fasting in my later years, but I always thought it was a bit odd because, it's like, well, you don't, like, what why don't you just give money or raise money for the starving people? You don't need to kind of pretend starve. That seems distasteful.
It does.
Like why it's like, if there's a volcano, you don't go, oh, I'm gonna walk across hot coals to symbolize the experience of a volcano. Like, well, yeah, it's not the same though, is it? Because you're doing it in very safe conditions.
Yeah.
And you're sort of proud of yourself for fasting.
Yeah.
That's not what starving people are experiencing at all.
For if you were raising money for, water sanitation and stuff in Africa, you wouldn't take a whole bunch of stuff to give you diarrhea and say, everybody, I'm trying to just keep people in Africa have life-threatening diarrhea where they lose all their fluids because there's waterborne diseases that could be easily controlled. And I'm raising money to purify wells. And so, I'm just gonna eat
40 hours of drinking putrid creek water,
and then having diarrhea, for like really terrible diarrhea for a couple of days. I'll eat a cup of barley sugar, but apart from that, I'm just gonna have really bad diarrhea.
Just gonna go and get put on a saline drip after my 40 hours of drinking fucking tepid puddle water. And it's like why is this urge to, it's sort of like perversely competitive or something, like, we're going to experience it so that I don't know what the urge is, but I mean, it's been around for a long time. Started in Canada, and I don't think it started with World Vision. I think it was just some Christian young person who was like, I'm going to do this as a gesture of solidarity, and, raised some money. And then they seized on the idea. And I mean, a lot of people, World Vision is one of those organizations that a lot of people like to use as an example of the problems of, big charity, because a lot of the money that you raise for World Vision gets spent at World Vision rather than actually helping people.
Yeah.
I don't think it's very
Are they Seventh-day Adventists, John, World Vision?
I think that's right. Yeah, I think that's right. Let's have a look. World Vision.
I feel like that was also... I feel like when I found out that it was Seventh-day Adventists, I was a bit angry because it was obviously... World Vision is obviously quite clever branding in that it's not the Seventh-day Adventist 40-hour famine. It's the World Vision 40-hour famine.
It was founded...
World Vision 7th. Let's have a look. So it says...
Interesting.
We are grateful for the port... I don't know. Maybe it's a collection of them.
Yeah, maybe it's like a generalist Christian humanitarian aid organization. And it says it is active in over 100 countries with a total revenue, including grants, products, and foreign donations, of $3.14 billion, which you would think would be enough to sort out some pretty serious problems. But of course, the problem with an institution like World Vision is, if it sorted out those problems, there'd be no more World Vision. But in any event, what are you finding out there?
This says Robert Pierce is his name, and he was an evangelical American Baptist.
There you go. Yeah. So it's weird. It's weird that we have this urge that's been so successful, and particularly in Australia and New Zealand, we can't even just do it symbolically. We got to go for 40 hours.
Yeah.
And I think first of all, I think let's 40 hours isn't that much.
No,
let's do 72 hours.
I do 72 on the rec. And we also haven't mentioned the barley sugar thing, John.
Yeah,
which is
that's right.
That was the one thing that you were allowed to eat, I believe. I mean, I think you drink water, and then on the 40-hour famine, which is fucking cheating if you ask me, there's a particular candy, a particular confectionery, which is a kind of I wonder why they chose this. Quite a basic confectionery called barley. They're still delicious. Barley sugars.
Yeah.
A hard candy that you can, like a boiled lolly that you can get in Australia.
Yeah. Boiled sweet.
Yeah.
That's right.
And for some reason, they were allowed. You were allowed to have.
They're worried about their sugar dropping, because they were just, as we discussed back in that era,
Yeah.
they were eating like salad bowls full of Nutri-Grain for breakfast, and they had to keep their sugar levels extremely high all the
For
time,
health.
or they'd have seizures.
They said we can't.
Yeah.
They said we can't let people's sugar levels drop to dangerous levels.
Yeah. And so I wonder, to what extent I have questions, who's done it? Do people have memories of doing it as kids? There was always kind of mythical sort of folkloric stories that you'd hear as kids about, so-and-so fainted or so-and-so couldn't stop throwing up because they were so traumatized by not eating for a day and a half. Or, so-and-so almost didn't make it or whatever. It was really tough. It was a tough challenge. And then I think, did it measurably benefit world hunger? And what did people who were actually starving think of it? I mean, if we were in that predicament and you heard about people across the other side of the world sort of gamifying your tragedy, you'd be like, well, don't do that.
Imagine if Kim Kardashian did the 40-hour famine. There's something especially tasteless about that. If Kim Kardashian said, guys, I'm just going to do the 40-hour famine for kids in Africa, and people would go, oh, this is really wrong. This is fucked.
Yeah, so there's a little bit of, I mean, I imagine there's been a bit of criticism of it over the years for that reason. So it's sort of got this tokenistic ring. But yeah, I don't know. It always had this. Every year, I remember it being a thing. I think my parents must have taken a stance because I would have been like, I'm keen to try this.
Yeah.
And they probably said, stopping eating is very dangerous.
Yeah. It's the worst thing
you've got to have 5 meals a day.
Yeah.
If you can, if you can't, at least 3, minimum 3.
We're very concerned that you're not morbidly obese yet,
Exactly.
which we've been led to believe means that you're extremely healthy if you're waddling along the street.
That's right.
John, I have something here that I think I wanted to ask you again. It wasn't all about fruit in my mind this morning. I had a second weird question, if you're ready for that.
Sure. Great, yeah.
Do you...
Vegetables. Do you have any vegetables in your house?
I'm to go, John, I'm announcing that I've changed my favorite vegetable. This one's very DPTM. This one's very DPM. This one's about phones. Do you leave your phone on silent most of the time, or do you allow it to make noisy notifications at you?
Most of the time I leave it on silent.
Yeah.
And the only time that I don't is when I really am expecting a call that I need to take or something like that. And it's amazing how quickly I become annoyed with it when it's on for that reason.
Yeah.
Because I feel like, I was thinking the other day, I feel like I'm working on that fucking stock exchange floor. So I'm trying to have a shower and I was going to jump out if the phone rang, but then I just kept getting ding, 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 ding. And I was like, I can't believe this shit. It's crazy. It's like, just makes you more conscious of the constant stream of demands on your attention.
So I noticed this last week because my parents were visiting me from Australia and I had 2 sets of aunties and uncles coming over as well. David and Ilka and Tim and Anne, shout out. We all had a great time. But one thing I noticed, which is a big generational difference, is a lot, maybe not all of them, but some of them leave their phone on like full sound notifications the whole time, which I hadn't thought about for years because I remember that period. There was a period some years ago where the notification thing started. I remember there was this period where you would be out and somebody's phone would beep with text messages or it would ring.
Yeah.
And there was this point where people said, okay, this is really not cool that this thing is like making tons of noise while we're trying to like be in a room together. But I hadn't thought about that for years because I guess it's stopped happening. Like, when was the last time that you were socializing with friends or you were out somewhere and somebody's phone was just like beeping and ringing with notifications and stuff? Like, I don't recall this happening in years. And then it made me, and then when I was spending a bit more time with my auntie.
It seemed extremely chuggy if I was out with someone and that happened.
This is the thing. It is a really chuggy thing. But I noticed that they have their notifications on a little bit more. And then I thought, wow, this is really one of those funny generational things where our generation and lower
totally right.
have gone no sound notifications on phones. We'll just check the screen in private and it will show us if we've received a text message or a missed call. Whereas their generation is still old school, or the way you know if somebody is trying to contact you is the phone rings like an old landline would or whatever.
Exactly.
But of course, what's happened and what you're referring to when you're saying, oh, I put my phone on, notification sounds and then it was going crazy. It's because the amount of notifications that would make a noise on your phone now is so much greater than when you had a Nokia 3210 where you'd get a few SMS messages a day and maybe a couple of people would ring you. Whereas now you've got push notifications, group chats and if you're in a group chat and fucking somebody sends a funny picture to the group chat, then you got 20 other cunts jumping in and going, let me talk about this, like, lol, haha, smiley face. And so your phone's just going beep, beep, beep. So because of that, everyone's going, well, I can't have this just do these noises all the time and go crazy. And apparently
and also,
go on.
The other thing that might be part of it is, I think that's the main thing, but people in our generation can be assured, most of them, well, I'm going to be looking at my phone again within minutes, so it doesn't matter.
That's the other
I'm
thing.
not worried about leaving it unattended, whereas maybe a boomer would be like, oh, if it doesn't make a noise, I'll happily just not look at it for 4 hours, and then somebody will be trying to send me urgent texts. That doesn't happen to me because I'm too addicted.
That's right. We wouldn't have been checking our Nokia 3210s anywhere near as much. I wonder if they have, they probably don't. Maybe they do. I wonder if anybody did a study of how many times people were checking their phones in, say, 1998 versus how many people were checking. I know there's tons of data on how much people check their phones today, but I wonder if there's if anybody did a study in the late 90s, 2000s about how many times you would check your dumb phone, your old Nokia, and just how many fold the increase has been. I looked up an article on, I think it was on Huffington Post. It was on Huffington Post because I was looking for if anyone else had noticed this phenomenon. And sure enough, there is an article that was pointing to kids on TikTok. Most of them, I think, are Gen Zers. And they were saying that a lot of them, I think you can hashtag, or rather you can search on TikTok, DND, which means do not disturb, and DNDAD, which is do not disturb all day, which was this phenomenon of Gen Zers leaving their phone on do not disturb for the whole day so that they could get on with whatever they were doing because they were feeling that they just couldn't get on with their lives. And my phone, I actually am a slightly chuggy man in that my settings on my phone are not quite dialed in because I have my phone on do not disturb all the time. But what that does is if somebody tries to ring me, they just instantly get a message that says this person is unavailable. Whereas what I'm looking for is I'm looking for the phone to ring but not make any noise. But I just have it. And people who are listening to this are going to go, oh, that's why every time I ring Alex, it always goes to the message bank. I'm sorry. I'm going to promise that I'm going to work it out after this moment.
Jacinta, one of the kind of things I admire about her, but also find irritating many times throughout the week, is the lack of attachment that she has to her phone, which means that I'll message her and she won't get back to me for, the whole day. And sometimes I'll be like, can you be home? Because we've got a tradie coming over. She just won't get it. So we've come to a compromise, which has been many years in the making, where she's got some setting on her phone now where, like, if I call twice, then I think she hears the call the second time.
Oh, I didn't even know. I didn't even know that was a setting.
Yeah, so it's like if it's just me calling to say hello, then she just can happily ignore it. But if I'm like I'm bleeding out, then she'll get
she'll get enough time to make a second call.
Exactly. Yeah, that's right. And sometimes I'll send a text just saying, just out of frustration when she hasn't answered, I'll just be like, I'm dead, or I like the kidnappers have asked for you to answer within 5 minutes. I was reminded recently of I think it was Samuel Johnson, who was a kind of 18th century British intellectual, and he wrote this diary entry, or maybe it was an article about watches, and because I guess they were just getting into the groove with like personal portable timepieces. You'd have your pocket watch or whatever, and so he wrote this article about how like the bad thing about it is I don't pay enough attention to my surroundings because I'm always just like fiddling with my pocket watch, and I just want to check the time all the time. And you think like, wow, this really, I mean, it's no wonder we're fucked with smartphones, because like you give people anything and they're like, oh fuck, what time is it? Yeah, okay.
In ancient Mesopotamia, they found clay tablets that said the guy just couldn't stop staring at the bonfire all night. I'm not spending enough time with my wife and family. I'm not present with them because I'm just so mesmerized and zombified by the campfire.
Right. No fire for the under 2 children. Or maybe it was the clay tablet. Yeah, no fire at school. The clay tablets, they said, you've got to stop with the tablets. You got to not have screen time.
Yeah. No tablet time.
I can't talk to you because you're always staring down at that fucking tablet reading cuneiform.
I'm trying to have a discussion with you about our relationship, and you keep spraying ink on your hand against the cave wall and just stencil it out. You're just addicted. You just doom stenciling all night.
Doom stenciling, exactly.
John, I've got something here about last week's Spotify. A couple of weeks ago, we spoke about Spotify guilty pleasures playlist, but maybe there's something else that we can just do these in real time. You can just tell me what's on your list, and then we can do that if you like.
I've got a special announcement.
Oh yeah,
and
sure.
You know what it is. Do you want me to do that?
Do you want? I thought you were going to say, "Do you want to do it?" And I was like, "That's kind of weird."
Yeah, doesn't feel like my place.
No, you do it, John.
That would be good. Actually, we should have done that.
Yeah.
But I spoke a little while ago on the podcast about the trips up to Sydney that I was having. People will hear this and immediately know where I'm going, I suspect. But I went up to Sydney to take part in an IVF process, and I'm happy to report that my early reports of the strength of my boys were not exaggerated, and we're now expecting a third member of the DPTM family. Well, I suppose 4, including Colin, our producer, in January 2025. Me and Jacinta.
Yeah, congrats.
Baby bongest.
Let me say on behalf of all the Don't Praise the Machine community, John, massive congratulations to yourself and Jacinta. I am a Patreon subscriber, so I got the news months ago along with bonus packs and other DPTM exclusives. But
yeah, DPTM premium tier members get they get access to the ultrasound reports that we get.
Me and John post anytime that me and John visit a doctor or specialist, then we have agreed to post the documents to the DPTM Patreon.
Kind of like that guy, what's his name, who's trying to prolong his life and youth.
Brian Johnson.
Except Brian Johnson, except that in our case, it's just like standard blood tests and urine samples.
That's that's amazing news, John. That's super exciting.
Thanks,
How
yeah.
I was actually gonna ask you, and my mother asked, so that's great that you can confirm on the cusp. January.
Yeah, that's right. So it's a bit unclear on dates, but probably the second half of January it's looking like. And it's going to be, so by the time we do episode 200, I guess, around there, I'll have a child running around screaming.
Yeah.
And don't know the sex. But I guess I can do a gender reveal. That'll be the next exciting. Well, I guess the next exciting thing will be the actual birth. And then at the same time, I'll say to people, again, if you're a premium Patreon subscriber, you'll have a live feed, I presume, of the ward, and so you'll get the news first. And yeah, it's exciting,
man.
So if you got parenting tips, if you got hand-me-downs that you don't need anymore, bibs, onesies.
I don't want to. I don't want to keep spruiking the Patreon, but there will be a Discord community coming this week, so there could be a parenting tip channel where all of our fellow DPTM parents can explain to John and Jacinta how they're being way too soft on the baby, on the child.
Don't parent the machine. Yeah, exactly. People will be posting Gabor Mate memes about gentle parenting and saying, John, you're not supposed to, smacking's frowned upon these days. And I'll say, well, you don't have to live with Bongus. He's the only,
and you've agreed to name, regardless of sex, you've agreed to name the child Bongus, as discussed earlier on the podcast.
Exactly. Yeah, that was a few for those who haven't heard that episode yet. This was when we were talking about the possibility that I might be having a child at some point in the future. And I think even then we secretly knew, but it was very early days. But you had made a little song,
with one of the AI
which was AI generated song about a boy named Bongus who was going to be my son, who sounded like a kind of, we need to talk about Kevin type child. There was something fucked about him.
I will play that at the end of the episode again, actually, because I love that song. I just had to dig it out of our WhatsApp messages, but I've sent that.
His first words will be shut up, Dad.
Rocking in my arms, he's my little boy, my brand new baby boy, name of Bongus.
It's great because it's like early Bob Dylan style as well.
So that smile bright like morning sun, I'll go out and buy him a gun. Can't do without Bongus. Excellent.
And then what is it?
And then it goes, tiny hands, I'll feed him buckets of blood. His first word will be shut up, Dad. So we can't wait for baby Bongus, and you will keep us posted. Massive congrats to yourself.
Thank you.
How is Jacinta going? How is Jacinta?
Jacinta's good. I guess it's interesting because obviously you first go to these scans and it just is a little blob.
Yeah.
And then it quite quickly, like frighteningly quickly, starts to look like a tiny little person.
Yeah.
And you can see its heartbeat and everything. And that now in the last couple of weeks, we've learned that it has some ability to hear. So I've taken that responsibility very seriously. I've been playing it lots of hits and been reading to it. And occasionally I'll say something just to get a rise out of Jacinta. Like she'll say, come and say goodnight to Cabbage, we call him.
Yeah, cute.
Him or her. And because the early scans, it bore an uncanny resemblance to a little cabbage. So we call it Cabbage. And she says, say goodnight to Cabbage. And then I'll say, good night, Cabbage. You're a disgrace to this family. Don't.
Have I sent you? There's an excellent meme that somebody did that I saw this year, where it's a pregnant woman with the belly, and they have somebody's using those headphones that are purpose built for pregnant women's stomach, and so it's got the headphones, and you can see that the husband or partner is holding the iPhone with and the what's being played to the baby is out of view of the mother, and the meme just says, I tell her that it's classical music, and it's on the screen. You can just see it's Alex Jones InfoWars. So good. So good.
That's great. I mean, it actually does open up avenues for the cast, because as you can imagine, there is all manner of weird and wonderful technology, including for parents at this stage. So there are actually those headphones, I think, that you can allow you to pump, Enya or whatever you want, wave sounds. And I kind of think, well, your baby doesn't know what the ocean is, so how does it know that's relaxing? And then there's also like apps which allow you to kind of wave the your phone close to the baby, and it can detect its heartbeat and things like that. So I can't wait to get into that.
Baby tech. That's the pivot, John.
Exactly. Baby Fitbit.
Baby tech. And we're the baby internet's #1 baby tech podcast.
Totally. Man, I'm coin in that, I reckon.
We get all the sponsors. They'd send us all the products to Spruik. We fucked up because this isn't about products enough, or if it is, it's just about us slagging them off. And speaking of which, this feels like kind of trivializing now that we've spoken about your beautiful baby on the way, and now I just have to talk about Spotify playlists. I'm real sorry about that.
Do it. I mean, it's relevant because I got to do a Bongus first songs playlist.
Yeah.
So far, I've just gone with Crisscross and
Jump by Crisscross.
Yeah,
the Mac Dad'll make you. So a couple of weeks ago, we spoke about the fact that I was going for a walk, and Spotify said, "Oh, Alex, we've got a special playlist for you, and it's your guilty pleasures playlist." And then I was talking about the fact that I just wasn't really comfortable with Spotify deciding that I should feel guilty about certain songs, and I wasn't sure if I was getting served a bespoke AI generated playlist, or if it was something that had been more, or at least I wasn't sure if the AI was deciding if the data was deciding what a guilty pleasure was, or if there was a person at Spotify clicking this song, mark this song as guilty pleasure. And so we got two messages. We got a message from our West Coast correspondent, Patrick Koo, who wrote in and said his guilty pleasures playlist on Spotify had a lot of the same songs as yours and mine. And we heard the same thing from London Walthamstow correspondent Samantha Cook, who said also Patrick wrote and said, "Sorry guys, I'm not sure how curated the guilty pleasures playlists are. Mine had most of the same songs as yours, except Patrick didn't have Steal My Sunshine by Len." And then Sam wrote in and said, "I think they just have some standards, and then they put in some of your favorites. So it's like a combination of songs that they've decided everybody gets as a guilty pleasure."
Yeah. And then some that are influenced by your actual taste.
Yeah. So Sam, they both sent us screenshots. So Sam's she's got Take Your Mama as her first one by Scissor Sisters. She's got You Get What You Give by New Radicals, which is such a good song. Total Eclipse of the Heart, Bonnie Tyler, you had that as well. Copacabana, Barry Manilow. She also had Dance Hall Days by Wang Chung, Gimme Gimme by ABBA, 50 Ways to Say Goodbye by Train, and Unwritten by Natasha Bedingfield. And Patrick Koo had You Get What You Give by New Radicals, Drops of Jupiter by Train, also Total Eclipse of the Heart, also Copacabana by Barry Manilow, also Closing Time by Semisonic. So, and he also had Take Your Mama. He had Celine Dion, Dancing in the Moonlight, Counting Crows, Mr. Jones.
What you've uncovered is
scandalous.
Exactly. Well, it is, because it's like everyone thinks they're a special little snowflake.
Yeah.
And I remember this song, Closing Time, and Spotify recognizes that I do it and nobody else does. And then we're all just reading from the same songbook, literally and figuratively. But I do think, I mean, I had a chat during the week with somebody as well who had the Guilty Pleasures playlist and showed me a bit of a sample, and it was exactly the same. It was a few of the standard stuff that I have, but then there was a kind of flavor to it which was a bit more contemporary, whereas mine was very much like those standards plus oldie bullshit ones, which might reflect the fact that I listened to too much music from the 70s. And so yeah, my guilty pleasure was like Lime in the Coconut or something. You know?
What is the story with that song? It's such a novelty song for like, I don't think of a lot of novelty songs from that period of music, and maybe it's just because I wasn't around. Maybe there were tons. Maybe they're like, but whenever I hear that, and I think the first time I ever knew of that Lime in the Coconut song is because Homer Simpson sings it in an episode. I think it was the first. I didn't know what he was doing, right. And then it's in the Reservoir Dogs soundtrack. Is that right?
In Reservoir Dogs, yeah, exactly. Which is it's a great soundtrack, of course, famously, and it's got a bit of a GTA vibe actually, because the soundtrack is kind of interspersed with the DJ, who I think is played by
straight face, long hair guy.
Yeah, the very kind of monotone comedian who introduces all of the songs, and then you get Lime in the Coconut and all the stuff that Quentin loves.
Yeah,
but yeah, it's Harry Nilsson. There you go.
Is it really? It's a Harry Nilsson song.
Yeah, I didn't realize that either. Yeah,
my parents have that Nilsson Schmilsson album, which is
he's a pretty
a great album.
He's a pretty unique creative, isn't he?
Yeah, he died of like massive alcoholism, didn't he? I better get that right. I don't want to say things like that.
He's alive and well.
He's a listener. How did Harry Nilsson die? I'm pretty sure it was Alco. How did Harry Nilsson die? Harry Nilsson, the American singer, passed away in 1984. He died from a heart attack, which was related to his long-standing health issues, including hypertension and cardiovascular disease. Do they sound boozy? Do they sound like boozy? Did Harry Nilsson, did ChatGPT, did Harry Nilsson enjoy
he did,
a beer or two? I'm actually going to ask it that. I'm going to ask it a beer or two. Yes, Harry Nilsson was known to enjoy a drink and had a reputation for being quite the party animal during his heyday. His lifestyle included drinking, which along with other health factors contributed to his early death. He was best known for his bohemian lifestyle and had a reputation for his fun-loving and sometimes reckless behavior, just like you, John. Fun-loving, reckless John Maloney. Fun-loving, reckless Junior Boost.
Exactly, except I am going to die from eating a sandwich like the woman from Mamas and Papas.
Mama Cass. The ham sandwich. He has some beautiful songs, Harry Nilsson, and my parents used to play that album a lot. I was telling somebody just last week how blessed I was to have parents that had very cool taste in music, which you don't realize.
Yeah, they did.
You don't realize when you're a kid, because you just think, oh, these are I guess everybody's parents listen to Nilsson Schmilsson and Talking Heads and Rodriguez. My parents were listening to Rodriguez before that film came out, and before the film lied and pretended that he only had an audience in South Africa. But he, in fact,
it wasn't much of a story that he just wasn't that great.
he in fact had a sizable audience in Australia, but that just wasn't a fun. That doesn't really help the film narrative to go, there was apartheid South Africa, and that's the only place that liked him. Oh, except also he was beloved in free and Open Australia, which didn't have an apartheid.
Exactly.
They just really liked him.
They just liked him, and that doesn't fit the story. They could have made it into some sort of. There's something about the Southern Hemisphere that people
That's
really
exactly
vibed
right. Yeah, there was
with him.
something about that sound that just worked much better in the vibrations of the music worked much better below the equator. I mean, he wrote "Everybody's Talking," Harry Nilsson, isn't that?
Yeah.
What a great song. Well, John, I feel like that's been one of the podcasts that we've done.
Definitely has. Yeah, I agree with that.
And housekeeping, guys, the Patreon is absolutely kicking goals right now. I added the members only audio feed this week. So any tier of membership, if you want the episodes a day early and the bonuses, then when you sign up on Patreon, you get a little link to put into Apple or Spotify, whatever your podcast thing is. And then it's super top secret and all the goodies come down there. And I got to launch the Discord this week. Another goddamn community online that I have to be active and a part of. I have to be part of the Squadcast community. I have to be part of my running community. I have to be part of the DPTM community. It's gone. Everything's gone full circle. It's back to notice boards and forums and communities.
I saw a great. I don't know if it was The Onion or maybe Australia's own Batuta Advocate, but it said Ray Gunn's apology to the breakdancing community offends the apology community.
Man, we'll keep you posted on her. Some very interesting. We just need to make sure that the whole podcast the DPTM doesn't just turn into the Rachel Ray Gunn news.
Exactly.
In the early days of podcasts, I listened to a weekly podcast about the band U2, and they would just do like U2 news that week, and then they'd obviously find things from the career of the band to also fill out the rest of the episode. But I was just like, a weekly podcast about U2 and what's been going on. Whereas,
especially U2 news, it's like they seem to just be like hanging around in LA this week, guys. Bono's probably going to go back to Ireland for Christmas.
What aisle of the supermarket was Larry Mullen Jr. spotted spending most of his time? This Larry Mullen Jr. supermarket aisle spotting segment of the show, guys. He was looking at different forms of pasta for a couple of minutes this week.
Junior, I didn't even know. That's the first time I've ever heard that.
He's the drummer.
Name.
Yeah, it's Bono. It's The Edge. It's Adam Clayton on bass and a sweet. And Larry Mullen Jr. is the most normal kind of. The other thing is that, like a lot of bands, it's really only the lead singer and The Edge in the case of U2 who would really get noticed a lot. Larry and Adam can probably live fairly normal lives, except perhaps in Ireland and maybe the UK. And maybe
Larry's quite handsome.
He is. He's a good-looking guy. He's a good-looking guy. And I think he's got the sweetest life, Larry Mullen Jr., because he just has always been the drummer in U2. He's got all the perks. Yeah. He can drum in front of 1 million people in Brazil, and then he can just put the sticks away and go to Copacabana, and nobody knows who the fuck he is.
It's great. Exactly. No need for a security detail. No one coming up and getting his autograph. So, guys, we want to give this episode out to one Larry Mullen Jr. Larry, you may not get recognized as often as you deserve, but we here at DPTM are huge fans, and we hope that you will respond at some point at your convenience to our repeated correspondence.
Excellent. That's been Don't Praise the Machine for this week, ladies and gentlemen, and we can't wait to see you next week.
The podcast.
Oh, rocking in my arms, he's my little joy, my sweet new baby boy, name of Bongus. Saw that smile, bright like morning sun. I'll go out and buy him a gun. Can't do without Bonga's tiny hands. I'll feed him buckets of blood. His first words will be shut up, Dad.